Hello, welcome back to the Tempest. When we ended off, I mentioned that the three men, Alonso, Sebastian, and Antonio, are now entirely in Prospero's power. They are all his worst enemies, and they are responsible for him having been exiled to this island. Alonso, the Duke of Naples, Sebastian, the King of Naples, Sebastian, the king's brother, and Antonio, who is Prospero's brother and who threw him out of his dukedom. And so they are entirely in his power. And when I say entirely in his power, they are not just entirely in his power in the sense that they are on the island. They have literally been driven mad by the little show that he had Ariel put on for them. And the question is, what will he do with that power? And of course, you know that when people do have ultimate power, the temptation is to abuse it. And Prospero, I think, really does take an alternative path here. In Act 4, Prospero actually apologizes to Ferdinand. He says, you know, I didn't mean to be so rude to you. We know that the reason he was rude was because he was just trying to protect Miranda's interests and trying to make sure that Ferdinand had good intentions, and he actually betroths them. Remember, that's a formal ceremony. If you join somebody's right hands, they are, you know, really supposed to get married. Some of you may have seen wedding ceremonies where there are two times where the bride and groom answer, I do. And the first time, the question is, will you take this woman? Will you take this man? And the answers are, I do. And then a few minutes later, you have, you know, do you take this woman or do you take this man? I do. And a lot of people wonder, well, why are there two there? Why do they do it twice? Well, because the will you take this woman, will you take this man, is a leftover of what used to be a separate ceremony called the betrothal. And once you were betrothed, that really was that. You really could not just break that off casually. Nowadays, if you're engaged and you break it up, basically what you do is you go down to Macy's and you cancel the gift registry. It's a little different in the Renaissance. So what Prospero is doing is he is betrothing the two of them, placing their hands in each other's. Here afore heaven I ratify my rich gift. O Ferdinand, do not smile at me, that I boast her off, for thou shalt find she will outstrip all praise and make it halt behind her. Then as a gift and thine own acquisition worthily purchased, take my daughter. And then he warns Ferdinand not to sleep with her before the marriage. Now, I think a lot of the time we just think this is funny, because we just have a different attitude toward it, or at least many people in our culture do. And I think also it can be seen as Prospero just being the over-anxious daddy. But I'd like you to be to consider the possibility that Prospero simply means what he says. Listen to what he says. But if thou dost break her virgin knot before all sanctimonious ceremonies may with full and holy rite be ministered, no sweet aspersion shall the heavens let fall to make this contract grow, but barren hate, sour-eyed disdain, and discord shall bestrew the union of your bed with weeds so loathly that you shall hate it both. Therefore take heed, as Hymen's lamps shall light you. And Ferdinand says, trust me, I will not do that. The idea is supposed to be that if they do anticipate the marriage, it will ruin the marriage. And I think possibly the idea is supposed to be that they need to demonstrate self-control, they need to demonstrate the ability of forbearance, and those are qualities that you want to see in married people, and you also want to see in people who are going to rule an entire country, as Ferdinand and Miranda will do. So those are very important issues. It's not just quite a joke. Ariel and Prospero start setting up a series of shows also in this act, and we get a chance to see them preparing for what is a mask. Now, the court masque was a very specific thing. It was not a play. It was a one-time only event. It was performed usually during the Christmas season or right before Lent and during Carnival. And it was a sort of an allegorical thing. It was something mythological, usually in the Jacobean court masque, the masques that were performed during King James's reign. What would happen is there was some kind of disorder, witches or satyrs or something like that, and something was not in control. And then through the magic of the actual monarch, all of this is changed, and the maskers, who are always noblemen, and very often, in this case, the Queen, Anne, who was James's wife, or his older son, Prince Henry, would come out with a series of dancers dressed in these beautiful mythological costumes and dancing, and that the dance expressed some kind of heavenly harmony. I know that I've mentioned before in the discussion at the very beginning the idea that the planets in their courses move about in perfect circles, and they create something called the music of the spheres that we cannot hear. The purpose of doing these dances was to be able to express on earth a sort of reflection of what went on in the heavens. So the dances expressed the heavenly harmony that supposedly prevailed at court, whether it did really or not. Ordinary people did not get a chance to see masks. Shakespeare's company, the King's Men, performed in masks because you had to have somebody doing those witches or satyrs or whatever it was, and usually they got tapped for the job. So if you're an ordinary person and you want to know the kind of thing that happens in a court masque, well, the best thing you can do is you can go to a play of Shakespeare's or somebody else where they have a little mask in it. And they're going to, as much as they can, bring it to you. They won't have all of the elaborate scene changes. They won't be able to afford costumes that are quite as flamboyant, and they won't be able to do all the flying machines and things that Inigo Jones, the designer, was able to do. But they will be able to give you a flavor of it, and that is what happens. This masque begins with three goddesses coming in. Iris. Iris is a messenger goddess. She's the goddess of the rainbow because the rainbow forms a bridge between earth and heaven, and that's the this sort of stream of her, the end of her garment. I suggest if you want to see what this should look like, go and see Fantasia. They have a nice little thing of that. And she is greeting Ceres. Ceres is the goddess of agriculture. She is the goddess of, as she says, thy rich lees of wheat, rye, barley, fetches, oats, and peas, thy turfy mountains where live nibbling sheep and flat meads thatched with stover to them keep. She's greeting her. Iris is greeting her in her capacity as Juno's messenger, because that is what Iris is. And Ceres addresses her as, hail, many-colored messenger, that ne'er dost obey the wife of Jupiter. And Ceres, being the goddess of agriculture, is also the goddess of fertility. So you want to invite her to a wedding because she will bring you prosperity, and she will also bring you healthy and abundant children. Something that is a little confusing to us is that almost everything, I can guarantee you that almost everything that is now some mysterious thing that happens in a modern wedding has its roots in the Renaissance or earlier. If you don't know what it was, it's from fertility stuff. The grain that gets thrown, that's fertility. The cake, fertility. The tossing of the garter is a leftover from a Renaissance custom where all the clothing that was tied together was untied, the ribbons that held the bride's clothing together was scattered, and people grabbed the ribbons for luck. And then, and you might find this hard to credit, you actually put the bride and groom together in bed. You tucked them up, gave them a drink of something strengthening, and then you'd go down and you'd continue the party. And you would be drinking to the idea that the bride would be, conceiving a child about any minute now. Good for you. Well, that's why you have all these references to fertility at a Renaissance wedding. It would be a standard wish. I don't recommend you try it at your next wedding because people sometimes get a little shirty about that and they think you're being nosy. But just so you know. Ceres doesn't want to be there if Venus or Cupid are there. And why that? Venus is the goddess of love. You'd think you'd want her to be there, but you don't, because she's the goddess of irresponsible love in this particular case, and so is Cupid. So they have been sent away just in the same way that Prospero said to Ferdinand, I don't want your marriage to be about lust. They are not there. And then in comes Juno. And it says that she descends, so she actually does fly down. They did have the technology to do this. Juno is the goddess of marriage. So we have the goddess of marriage, the messenger goddess, and we have the goddess of fertility. And this is meant to be produced just for an audience of two, for Ferdinand and Miranda. That may seem very odd, but if a royal couple got married, producing a masque wouldn't be an unusual way to celebrate the occasion. That was something that was done at court. And then the nymphs come in and the shepherds come in and they're supposed to be dancing. Now, normally, what happens in a masque is you have the dancing, there's all this wonderful dancing, and then there's something called the takeout or the calling out, where the maskers go to important members of the audience and take them and dance with them, and then you actually get to a point where there's a certain amount of social dancing, and then there's an end, and there's a song, and it all ends nicely. This does not end nicely. What happens is, all of a sudden, everything breaks off. Enter certain reapers, properly habited. They join with the nymphs in a great graceful dance, towards the end whereof Prospero starts suddenly and speaks, after which to a strange, hollow, and confused noise they heavily vanish. Heavily vanish, who knows what that means? Suddenly vanish, maybe. But Prospero says, I can't continue this. I've forgotten this plot about Caliban. I forgot. So that perfect harmony can't be celebrated quite yet. There's still too much chaos around. Ferdinand is very startled to see him behaving in such a sudden way, or such a distressing way. And Miranda says, this is very unusual for Dad. He's usually a very calm person. And Prospero answers them by telling them that the mask that they saw are performed by spirits, and that this is ephemeral, that dancing and masking and theater is evanescent. Well, it's particularly true here because it's performed literally by spirits. But carry that one step further, this performance that we are seeing is also very transitory. It only lasts the 4 hours that Prospero told us to expect. Carry that a step further, so is life. In the theater of this world, we all play a role. Our role is temporary. We do our little scene, and then it's over. And this is a very powerful speech in which the little embedded mask, and then the larger circle of the play is surrounded by the larger circle of the theater of the world, the Theatrum Mundi. You do look, my son, in a moved sort, as if you were dismayed. These are actors. Our revels now are ended. These are actors, as I foretold you, were all spirits, and are melted into air, into thin air, and like the baseless fabric of this vision, the cloud-capped towers, the gorgeous palaces, the solemn temples, the great globe itself, yea, all which it inherit shall dissolve, and like this insubstantial pageant, faded, leave not a rack behind. We are such stuff as dreams are made on, and our little life is rounded with a sleep. So the revels end, and we are these little insubstantial spirits ourselves. Now, one of the things that, of course, now we have the Ariel report. They're sent off, and the Ariel report comes in, and he talks about what he's done with all of these different people. They set another show. This show instead is the show that's intended to trap Stephano and Trinculo. And Ariel comes in with a armload of glistering apparel. He's got beautiful things, maybe the mask costumes that we just saw, and he's going to hang them all out, and they're going to form a bait for Trinculo and Stephano. Now, I think it's interesting that it's Trinculo and Stephano who are stupid enough to stop and put on the clothes. They don't carry out their plan of going after Prospero. They start to try on everything, going, ooh, look at me, look at me. And Caliban tries to tell them, no, drop it, it's trash. Go after the books. What did I tell you? Do the murder first. Don't do that, it's stupid. So he describes it as luggage. He says it's trash. Let it alone, you fool. Caliban's actually the smartest of the three of them. And maybe that shouldn't come as a surprise. And then the spirits that we've just seen as gods and goddesses and nymphs and shepherds come in dressed up as dogs, and they chase them around and bark. And eventually, as we find out later, they are chased into a horse pond, which is basically a pond that has a certain amount of urine in it. It's very unpleasant indeed. Now, Prospero at the beginning of Act 5 has to decide what he's going to do with this power. What is he going to do? And he asks Ariel, what's happening? Remember, we had the idea of this happening in real time. 2 glasses to 6 glasses. It's almost over. Now does my project gather to a head. My charms crack not, my spirits obey, and time goes upright with his carriage. How's the day? On the 6th hour, at which time, my lord, you said our work should cease. I did say so, when first I raised the tempest. Say, my spirit, how fares the king and his followers? Confined together in the same fashion you gave in charge. Just as you left them, all prisoners, sir, in the lime grove which weather fends your cell, they cannot budge till your release. The king, his brother, and yours abide all 3 distracted, and the remainder mourning over them, brimful of sorrow and dismay. But chiefly him that you termed, sir, the good old Lord Gonzalo. His tears run down his beard like winter's drops from eaves of reeds. Your charm so strongly works 'em, that if you now beheld 'em, your affections would become tender. Dost think so, spirit? Mine would, sir, were I human. And that makes Prospero pause. Ariel isn't human. He doesn't have normal human emotions. And yet, he says, I would pity them if I were human. And that makes Prospero say, ah, and so will I. And mine shall. Hast thou, which art but air, a touch, a feeling of their afflictions, and shall not myself, one of their kind, that relish all as sharply passion as they, be kindlier moved than thou art? Though with their high reasons wrongs I am strook to the quick, yet with my nobler reason, 'gainst my fury do I take part. The rarer action is in virtue than in vengeance. What he shares in common with these people is that they are people. They're human. And he has to take note of that, and he has an opportunity to use vengeance, but in a sense, it's more powerful, it's stronger to choose not to choose the path of virtue. And he says he will break the charms and restore their senses. Prospero is now left alone on stage, and he works this last bit of magic. He describes some of the things that he's been able to do, virtually to control nature in a way that human beings really can't do. And even he says that he has raised the dead. And yet, he's going to give up his power. But this rough magic I here abjure, and when I have required some heavenly music, which even now I do, and that is assigned to the musicians in the gallery, to work mine end upon their senses that this airy charm is for, I'll break my staff, bury it certain fathoms in the earth, and deeper than did ever plummet sound, I'll drown my book. I'll lift this charm, and then I will give up my art. I will end it. This is one of the reasons why people often think of this as Shakespeare's Farewell to the Stage, because if you think of Prospero as being like a director or like a playwright, that he's created all of these things, he is giving up his art, just as Shakespeare did later. And all of them are brought in, they are still amazed, and Prospero introduces himself. And one of the things that he has to do is to discase himself. In other words, he's going to take off his magician clothes and put on his clothes that are the clothing that he wore when he was Duke of Milan. So they'll recognize him. He's going to come in totally differently. And Prospero states that that is who he is. Behold, Sir King, the wronged Duke of Milan, Prospero, for more assurance that a living prince doth now speak to thee, I embrace thy body, and to thee and thy company I bid a hearty welcome. Whether thou beest he or no, or some enchanted trifle to abuse me, as late I have been, I not know. Thy pulse beats as flesh and blood, and since I saw thee, the affliction of my mind mends, with which I fear a madness held me. This must crave, and if this be at all, a most strange story. Thy dukedom I resign, and do entreat thou pardon me my wrongs. So Alonso apologizes. He says, I am sorry. One of the things you'll see is that Sebastian and Antonio don't apologize. In fact, Prospero knows that they've tried to kill Alonso. He says, I know you tried to do that, but I'm not going to blow the whistle on you. So there is this reconciliation, but you can forgive somebody and hold the olive branch out to them, but it's up to them to take it, and some people don't want your forgiveness. And it seems as though Antonio really doesn't want Prospero's forgiveness, and that is just the way that goes. And then they start to talk about the irreparable loss. We've kind of reconciled the older generation, but what's happened to the younger generation? Alonso is very grief-stricken because he thinks he's lost his son Ferdinand. And Prospero says, well, I lost my daughter. And of course you know that that is what people say when a wedding takes place. You know, you're not losing a daughter, you're gaining a son, or whatever it is. I have lost my daughter. A daughter? Oh, heavens, that they were living both in Naples, the king and queen there. That they were there, I wish myself were mudded in that oozy bed where my son lies. When did you lose your daughter? In this last tempest. So they were lost at the same time, to each other. And he says, come in, I can give you welcome. I am Prospero. And then he says, I will show you this last wonder. And it is a show. He parts the curtains, and what are they doing but playing chess? Now, in most productions of The Tempest, they are not playing chess. You will see them kind of all over each other and, you know, smoochy poo. But I think it's interesting that the stage directions really do say that they're playing chess, which is, first of all, it indicates that Ferdinand was telling the truth when he said to Prospero, you can trust me, sir. I will not do anything that I shouldn't before we're actually married. And so they're playing this innocent game. It's also appropriate for them to be playing a strategy game, which is something appropriate for rulers of a kingdom. Miranda being Prospero's heir and Ferdinand being Alonso's heir, and that they will be ruling Naples and Milan together. It's fixed in this chess game. The new generation is going to finish the reconciliation of the older generation. It's really going to be resolved. And Alonso and Ferdinand get back together, and they're very, very happy to find out that, in fact, Ferdinand is not dead. Gonzalo says that he's lived to see this. It's been worthwhile getting so old and going through so much to be able to see these two marry. And when Miranda sees all these people, she says, "Oh, wonder, how many goodly creatures are there here! How beauteous mankind is! Oh, brave new world that has such people in it!" So she sees them all as equal. Oh, how wonderful. And Prospero has to say, "'Tis new to thee." He doesn't want to say, well, this guy's okay, and this guy has made it up, and that guy's a nice guy, but these two, they're really mean. He's going to leave that up to her. He's a wise parent. Pretty much you don't destroy somebody's innocence like that. And then, of course, it turns out that the bosun and the master and all the sailors, they're all right, too. And then Caliban and Trinculo and Stefano come in, and they explain that they have been driven into the horse pond, and they all smell terrible, so they're all trying not to stand next to each other. And Caliban says, "I can't believe I thought this guy was a god. He was so stupid. He's a drunkard." Prospero has to say, "Caliban is mine. Two of these fellows you must know and own. This thing of darkness I acknowledge mine." And sometimes that's seen as, well, he has to acknowledge that Caliban is his own, but also what Caliban represents: resentment, not letting it go, graspingness. The capacity to murder is something that is part of Prospero. He can't say that he has no part of it. And then we find out that they will, Ferdinand and Miranda, we will travel back to Milan, and they will get married, and we will have this reconciliation. Actually, Naples is where the marriage is going to take place. And Prospero is going to send the storm, not a storm, but auspicious winds. It's just the opposite. He's going to send them good winds, and that will be the last. Ariel, that's his last job. "My Ariel chick, that is thy charge. Then to the elements be free, and fare you well." So Ariel's going to be freed after this, but this is his last task. And it is Prospero's last task, because he says, "I'm going to retire. I am done. I am done as Duke of Milan, but I'm also done as a magician. I'm just a private man now." The epilogue epilogues usually are spoken not as the character, but as the actor playing the character. And the actor playing Prospero has, in fact, stepped down from his role as the Duke of Milan to being an ordinary person, an actor. And yet there's all these references to Prospero and his position. It's the audience who has power now. They can choose to send him on his way, to actually indulge him, to give them their hands, or to condemn him. And if you think of this as something that Shakespeare would say towards the end of his career, there is this sense of, "I am finished. Now my charms are all o'erthrown, and what strength I have's mine own, which is most faint. Now 'tis true I must be here confined by you, or sent to Naples. Let me not, since I have my dukedom gotten pardoned, my deceiver, dwell in this bare island by your spell, but release me from my bands with the help of your good hands. Gentle winds thy breath must fill, or else my project fails, which was to please. Now I want spirits to enforce, art to enchant, and my ending is despair unless I be relieved by prayer, which pierces so that it assaults mercy itself and frees all faults. As you from crimes would pardoned be, let your indulgence set me free." And that is the end of the play. it is the end, to a certain extent, if you can imagine it, of Shakespeare saying, "Be indulgent, let me go, as I have tried to entertain you." Now, as I said, this is often looked at as his last play. And I've also told you that that isn't true. There were other plays after this, but it is our last lecture. And I hope you've enjoyed watching this and taking the class as much as I've enjoyed making these lectures. It's been a lot of fun. In purely business terms, your final paper should be due right about now, and your scene, the staged scene that you're going to be doing, is due on the exam date at the exam time. There is the equivalent of a bonus track on these lectures, and if you look on the web page, you will find a link to it. But at this point, I would like you to say thank you and to ask you, let your indulgence set me free.